I still remember the cold snap in the air that night, January 14th, the eve of my 30th birthday. I was holding a small bottle of red wine, the good kind, something I'd picked up from a local winery during a solo trip I'd taken to clear my head the year before. It was meant to be a gift for my parents. Something to celebrate, maybe laugh over dinner, reminisce about childhood stories, even endure a few cringy baby photos my mom always loved to pull out when guests were over. That's how I pictured it anyway. A quiet dinner with my family, maybe a cake at the end. Nothing big, just normal, comforting. But when I pulled into their driveway, everything already felt off. No extra car parked out front like I'd expected. No balloons, no lights in the window. Just the porch light casting a dull yellow over the door like it had for the last 2 decades. I told myself maybe they were keeping it low-key this year. I hadn't asked for anything, just mentioned I'd be coming over after work. It wasn't like I was expecting a party. Then I saw it. A sheet of paper taped crookedly to the front door. Just one line written in fat, black marker. "You're not welcome here." I stood there for a second, gripping the wine bottle with both hands, rereading the words like maybe I was misunderstanding them. Maybe it was a joke? Some prank my younger cousin might pull? But the handwriting was unmistakable. My mother's. Slanted, dramatic cursive with extra loops on the Y and the H. My stomach dropped. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. Surely, no one puts that on their own front door. Not for their son. Not on his birthday. But then I heard it. Laughter. Not distant echoes, not TV noise. Actual voices. Familiar ones. My dad's low chuckle, my sister's high-pitched laugh, my brother-in-law talking loudly over everyone like he always does. Plates clinking. The oven timer beeping. Someone said, "Pass the bread." The dog barked once and was immediately hushed. They were having dinner. My birthday dinner. Without me. My first instinct was to knock. To just demand an explanation, ask them what was going on, what I did wrong. But something in me, something old and worn down, stopped me. A part of me that had seen this coming in slow motion for years, like a car veering off course in an icy parking lot, tires spinning, no one at the wheel. So instead, I took out my phone and snapped a photo of the sign. Not out of pettiness, out of necessity, like proof that it had really happened, that I hadn't imagined it. I walked back to my car, set the wine bottle on the passenger seat, and just sat there for a while, watching the house through the windshield. They didn't even notice. No one peeked out. No one texted. No one cared. That was the last time I saw my family in person. For context, my name's Blake, and I had just turned 30. I'd been living about 40 minutes away from my parents' house since I was 24, after finally landing a stable job in digital marketing. Nothing flashy, but I'd worked hard for it. My relationship with my family had always been a little strained. I was the quiet one, the middle child sandwiched between a golden child older sister, Lauren, and the loud, reckless youngest, Eric, who still lived with my parents at 27 and somehow managed to make himself the center of attention every time we were all in the same room. Lauren had always been their pride. Got married at 23, 2 kids by 28, house in a nice suburb, did everything right. She and Mom were like best friends who texted daily. Dad called her his little CEO. Meanwhile, I was just Blake, the one who never caused trouble, who paid his own rent, didn't ask for help, and got forgotten at family dinners more than once. Eric, on the other hand, got bailed out of a DUI when he was 25 and was still treated like some lovable screw-up who just needed time to find himself. I wasn't the kind of person who needed validation. At least, I didn't think I was. But over the years, all the little things added up. The forgotten birthdays, the missed calls, the fact that my job, my life, was never quite interesting enough to talk about. I was always the one asked to bring extra chairs to Thanksgiving, never the one asked about work or relationships. Once, I brought a girlfriend to a family barbecue, and Mom called her Brittany the whole evening. Her name was Claire. Still, I kept showing up, because they were my family, because I thought maybe one day, things would click. They'd see me for who I was, not who I wasn't. So that night, standing on that porch, staring at that sign, I felt something inside me crack and shift. Not rage. Not even sadness. Just a cold, settling silence. I went home. I blocked all their numbers. One by one. No message. No explanation. Not even to Lauren, who had stopped reaching out to me months ago anyway. Too busy with her real family. I deleted the family group chat. I pulled down the few framed photos I had of us in my apartment. It was like performing a quiet funeral. Just me and the ghosts. For a while, I didn't hear anything. No one followed up. No one emailed. No letters. No smoke signals. It was like I'd been erased. And I got used to it, faster than I thought I would. I started taking long walks. Cooked more. Went to therapy. Built new routines. I even got promoted. Then, about a year later, almost to the day, I got a message request on Facebook. It was from an account I didn't recognize. The profile picture was blank, but the name was unmistakable. My father. Blake, I know you're upset, but we need to talk. It's urgent. I stared at the message for a full minute before clicking out of it. My hands were shaking. I didn't respond. I didn't even block him. I just left it hanging there, like a rotten fruit on a dead tree. 2 days later, another message. This time from Lauren. I don't know why you're still acting like this. What happened last year was a misunderstanding. But now we really need you. Mom and Dad are in trouble. Please answer. That one hit differently. It wasn't just the message, it was the tone. Like I was the problem. Like I was punishing them unfairly. I read it again, and all I could think about was that sign on the door. The laughter. The way they didn't even notice I was outside. A week later, the messages escalated. Eric tried calling from a different number. Then my mom emailed me from a church account. They were in financial trouble, facing foreclosure on their house, and they needed help. Money. Fast. Apparently Eric had racked up some debt under their names, and Lauren and her husband were tapped out because of some remodeling project. They were turning to me, the invisible son, the one who wasn't welcome, and now they were furious that I wasn't leaping in to save them. It got worse after that. Guilt-trippy texts, long emails about family bonds, and how could you do this to your own mother? Even a voicemail from my dad, practically growling that I was being dramatic over one mistake, and that I was letting a grudge ruin the entire family. I didn't delete any of it. I was saving it. Because something in me had changed that night on the porch, and I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story this time. But what they didn't know, what they still don't know, is that I'm not just ignoring them. I'm planning something, and they're not going to see it coming. I didn't respond to any of their messages right away. I just watched them come in, one after another, each one layered with guilt, denial, and a strangely casual sense of entitlement. It was like they'd skipped right over the apology and jumped straight to the part where I was supposed to save them. As if nothing had really happened. As if I should have just brushed off being literally locked out of my own family on my birthday. As if I didn't have a right to be hurt. But I waited. I waited to see if maybe, someone would actually acknowledge what they did. Not beg. Not manipulate. Just own it. They never did. Lauren was the first to break the silence in a big way. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, wearing oversized sunglasses and holding one of those half-melted iced coffees she always nursed when things were stressful in her life, like when her husband forgot their anniversary or when the neighbor's kid got into a better preschool than her daughter. I didn't even know how she found my address. I know you're mad, she said the second I opened the door, standing on my welcome mat like it had personally offended her. But this is getting ridiculous. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I just stared at her. She looked past me into the apartment like she expected to see signs of misery. A pizza box, takeout cartons, maybe a bottle of cheap wine, and a worn-out blanket on the couch. Instead, she saw a tidy living room, a small bookshelf with novels I actually read, and the faint scent of coffee and pine cleaner. I had made a life, a peaceful one, and I think that threw her off. What do you want, Lauren? I asked, voice low. They're gonna lose the house, she said, stepping closer like we were just picking up a sibling argument from childhood. Eric messed up. Mom and Dad are scared. And now they're blaming me for not doing more because I didn't want to take out a second mortgage. But I've got 2 kids, Blake. You don't even have. Don't, I said sharply. She shut up for a second. You weren't even at dinner, I said, still holding the door. The night of my birthday. You weren't there. But you didn't call either. You didn't ask why I wasn't there. I thought maybe you canceled. Lauren. She looked away, and her voice went flat. Mom said you didn't want to come. There it was. The lie. So easy. So rehearsed. And you believed her? I asked. After 30 years of being ignored, brushed aside, excluded? After all the times I showed up, supported you, backed you, you really thought I just flaked on my birthday? She crossed her arms. Look, I'm not here to fight. I'm just trying to fix this. We're family, Blake. I let that hang in the air for a beat, then stepped back and quietly closed the door in her face. She left without knocking again. 2 weeks passed. More emails. More texts. My dad sent one that read, "We didn't mean it to be cruel. It was just a hard time, and we didn't want drama that night. We needed peace." That one stuck with me. We needed peace. As if my presence disrupted their peace. As if I was the storm. The next turning point came when I ran into my uncle, my mom's younger brother, at a coffee shop downtown. I hadn't seen Uncle Pete in over a year, but he always liked me more than the others. We chatted briefly, small talk mostly, until he brought up the foreclosure. "They're talking to everyone they can," he said, "trying to get someone to help float them for a few months." I nodded. "I heard. You know your dad told me you offered to help, but then pulled out at the last minute?" My jaw tensed. "That's not true," I said flatly. Pete frowned. "Yeah, didn't sound like you. Thought it was weird." So now they were lying. Not just covering up their actions, but rewriting the narrative, trying to turn me into the villain. I knew my parents were good at spinning things, but this was new. And Pete wasn't the only one. Word got back to me through another cousin that I'd abandoned the family in their time of need, that I was bitter over something small, and that I held grudges like a child. That was the last straw. I didn't say anything publicly. I didn't respond to the messages or tell anyone my side. I just started watching, listening, paying attention. And that's when I found out about the account. My mother had opened a joint savings account in my name when I was a teenager. Something she told me was just in case. I never used it, never touched it. But I found out through a quiet conversation with Pete, who used to work in banking, that the account was long closed and that it had been emptied 5 years ago. Over $14,000. Money that was supposed to be mine from an old inheritance, something left by my grandmother, who passed when I was 19. I never saw a dime. Pete looked uncomfortable when he told me. I didn't want to get involved, Blake. But I figured you should know. They said they needed it for Eric's rehab. Eric. Rehab number 2, if I remembered right. The one he left early because he wasn't feeling it. The one my parents praised him for trying, even though he quit and ended up spending the next year couch surfing with friends and blowing through his credit card. I felt sick. It wasn't about the money. Not really. It was about the pattern. The betrayal. The fact that they stole from me quietly, then cut me off when it no longer suited them. They had been using me, emotionally, financially, and now, reputationally. And when I finally stopped giving, they acted like I was the one who turned my back. I kept everything. Screenshots, voicemails, copies of the old account statements that Pete helped me track down. I started documenting things, not out of paranoia, but preparation. Because I wasn't going to keep playing the role they cast me in. Then came the betrayal that shattered the last piece of me that still, stupidly, hoped they'd change. It was a Sunday afternoon when I got the message. Not from Lauren. Not from my parents. From Claire. Yes, that Claire. My ex. The one they had called Brittany all through that barbecue. The one who broke things off 2 years ago because she said she didn't want to marry into my family. We hadn't spoken since. Her message was short, cold, and devastating. "Your mom reached out to me. She said you're spiraling and asked if I'd consider talking to you, maybe helping you see reason." I told her not to contact me again. Just thought you should know. I don't know how long I stared at the screen. My mother had contacted my ex-girlfriend behind my back, told her I was spiraling, and tried to manipulate her into emotionally re-engaging with me to what? Snap me out of my tantrum. Drag me back into the fold. I felt like I couldn't breathe. It was humiliating. It was intrusive. And it was the most grotesque violation of my privacy I'd ever experienced. She hadn't just crossed a line. She had bulldozed through a wall. And for what? Because I wouldn't open my wallet? Because I refused to be their safety net? That night, I sat at my desk and opened a blank document. At the top, I wrote, "They said I was being dramatic over one mistake." And underneath it, I began writing every moment, every quote, every memory, every lie. I laid it all out in clear detail, dates, bank records, names, texts. It wasn't for revenge. Not yet. It was for clarity. Because when the time came, and I knew it was coming, I wasn't going to just walk away. I was going to make sure they never forgot what they did. For about 2 weeks after Claire's message, I couldn't sleep. I'd lie in bed with the lights off and stare at the ceiling, my mind spinning like a scratched record stuck in a loop. I kept replaying every moment from that night on the porch, the sign, the laughter, the warmth behind the windows I'd never been invited into. Then the emails. the accusations, the fake victim narratives they were spreading. And now this, my own mother reaching out to an ex I hadn't spoken to in 2 years, telling her I was spiraling. I wasn't spiraling. I was waking up. But in that moment, it didn't feel like strength. It felt like freefall. I didn't tell anyone. Not my coworkers. Not the few friends I still kept in touch with. Not even my therapist, at first. I just shut down. I went into autopilot mode. Wake up. Shower. Eat something small. Commute. Work. Smile politely at meetings. Laugh when someone made a bad joke about spreadsheets. Reply to emails like nothing was wrong. I'd always been good at staying invisible. I was raised to be. You learn early, when you're the overlooked one, how to fold yourself small. How to take up just enough space to be tolerated, not enough to be a burden. But eventually, that survival skill starts to feel like a coffin. One night, I stayed late at the office, not because I had to, but because I didn't want to go home. My apartment had become too quiet, too still. It felt like a waiting room I'd been sitting in for years, hoping someone would finally walk through the door with answers. Instead, all I had was a cold dinner and that stupid wine bottle I still hadn't opened from my birthday. It sat on the counter like a cruel souvenir. I remember slumping over my desk, the glow of the monitor lighting up my tired eyes, and just whispering, "Why wasn't I enough?" It was the first time I'd said it out loud. It wasn't just about the birthday, or the sign, or even the money they took behind my back. It was years of being the second thought, the afterthought, the background character in a family that always made me feel like I had to earn a seat at the table that should have been mine by birthright. And now, they wanted help. Not because they saw my value, but because they saw my wallet. That realization broke something in me. But in the silence that followed, something else started to grow. Resolve. A few days later, I booked a session with my therapist. I hadn't seen her in a while, not since things with Claire ended, and I almost canceled at the last minute. But I went. I sat down across from her, still half in that haze, and I just said, "I think I'm done pretending they'll change." She nodded, didn't say anything, just waited. And for the first time, I told someone everything. Not just the surface level stuff. Not just my family doesn't get me. I told her about the sign on the door, the stolen inheritance, the lies they were spreading, Claire, the messages, the guilt trips, everything. It poured out of me like water from a cracked dam. My voice shook. My hands trembled. But I didn't stop. And when I was done, she sat with it for a while before finally asking, "What would healing look like for you, Blake?" That question haunted me for days. I didn't have an answer at first. I wasn't sure I'd ever be fully healed. But I knew what I didn't want anymore. I didn't want to be the dependable, invisible son. I didn't want to be the backup plan. The silent support beam holding up a house that never once sheltered me. So I started small. I redecorated my apartment. Nothing drastic, just changes. I got rid of the old couch my parents gave me when I moved out. A hand-me-down with coffee stains and a sagging cushion I'd never bothered replacing. I bought one I actually liked. Firm. Clean. New. I donated old clothes. Got new sheets. Rearranged the furniture. Hung art I actually cared about. It felt like reclaiming space in my own life. Then, I started cooking again. I'd forgotten how much I liked it. Not just microwave meals or rushed pasta, but real cooking. I made lentil stew one night, slow-cooked for hours, with garlic naan and roasted carrots. It filled the apartment with warmth. I lit a candle, ate on real plates. It was just me, but for the first time, that didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. At work, I quietly started applying for new positions. Not because I hated my job, but because I realized I'd settled. I'd been playing safe my entire life, afraid to take risks, afraid of being too much. My father always said, "Be grateful for what you have," which is code for don't ask for more. But I wanted more. So I updated my resume, started networking, sent out emails, got a few rejections, but one day, a small creative agency reached out. They liked my work. They were impressed by a campaign I'd helped run. They offered me a role, more responsibility, more money, and most importantly, respect. I took it. And it felt like stepping into sunlight after years of cloud cover. The messages from my family kept coming. More desperate now. More manipulative. Lauren sent a photo of the house, the for sale sign crooked in the yard. "They're losing everything, Blake. Please, just talk to them." Eric sent a voice note at 2 a.m. Slurred. Rambling. Something about how mom cries every night. And how I was being selfish. I deleted it. My mother finally broke and sent me a long, rambling email titled, "I did what I thought was best." It was 4 paragraphs of her justifying the money, the birthday, the message to Claire. Not a single sentence said, "I'm sorry." Not once did she ask how I was. It ended with, "You'll regret turning your back on family." I stared at those words for a long time. And instead of crying, I laughed. Because for the first time in my life, I knew I wouldn't regret it. Not even a little. My rise wasn't dramatic. There was no overnight transformation. No grand reveal. It was subtle, steady, like a slow tide rolling in, reshaping the shore without making a sound. I started running in the mornings. Just half a mile at first. Then a mile. Then more. I built playlists. Got new shoes. Tracked my progress. I picked up photography again, something I hadn't touched since college. I dusted off my old DSLR and started shooting sunrises, city streets, people at the park. I made an Instagram account for it. It grew slowly. A few strangers commented on my shots. That felt nice. I volunteered on weekends at a local community center, helping teenagers with resumes and college apps. It gave me purpose. It reminded me that I had something valuable to offer, that my voice mattered. And I made new friends. Not many, but good ones. People who didn't know me as the quiet one or the backup son. People who liked me for me, the man I was becoming. He didn't need their approval. He didn't need to prove his worth. But that didn't mean he'd forgotten. One rainy afternoon, nearly 10 months after that birthday night, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I played it back. It was my father. "Blake, I don't know what to say anymore. I know we hurt you. But this is too far. You're choosing to watch your family fall apart. I hope you're proud." He hung up. No apology. No ownership. Just one final guilt trip. But I wasn't watching them fall apart. I was watching the consequences they built finally catch up to them. And soon, I'd be doing more than watching. Because I'd been preparing. Patiently. Quietly. Strategically. And when the time came, they'd learn exactly who I'd become without them. The email from my father, the one with, "I hope you're proud," wasn't what hurt the most. What hurt was how predictable it was. Because even after everything, after the birthday snub, the inheritance theft, the lie to Claire, the gossip they spread, they still thought they could control the narrative. They still saw me as the same old Blake. The background son. The invisible one. The one who'd eventually cave. Who always did the right thing, even if it meant bleeding quietly for everyone else's comfort. That version of me was gone. And now, I wasn't just rebuilding. I was preparing. Because when people like that fall, they always look for someone to blame. Someone to drag down with them. And this time, I wasn't going to be their safety net or their scapegoat. This time, I was going to be their mirror. And I'd make sure they couldn't look away. I started with the documents. Pete, Uncle Pete, the one honest man left in our orbit, had helped me dig up the old banking records a while back. He'd quietly pulled a few strings at the credit union where he used to work, and together we'd confirmed it. The inheritance account in my name had been drained 5 years ago. Bit by bit. ATM withdrawals. Transfer after transfer, all logged under my mother's login credentials. I'd asked him then, "Can they be held liable?" He'd sighed. "It's tricky. You were technically a legal adult by the time the withdrawals happened, and if your name was on the account, but you never disputed anything until now. It's not impossible, but it's a long process." I hadn't pursued it at the time. But now, things were different. I wasn't looking for the money anymore. I was looking for leverage. The next step was Claire. It took me 3 days to work up the courage to text her. I didn't want to stir the past, but I owed it to myself to understand how deep this mess went. I kept the message short and respectful. "Hey Claire, I promise I'm not trying to open old wounds. But I need to ask, when my mother reached out to you, what exactly did she say?" To my surprise, she responded almost immediately. She said you were having a breakdown, that you'd isolated yourself from everyone. She asked if I'd call you and try to get you to snap out of it. She made it sound like you were spiraling into some dark place. Said she was afraid for your mental health. I was shocked, Blake. I knew things ended badly, but I never thought your mom would go that far. I sat with that for a long time. They hadn't just smeared my name behind closed doors. They were weaponizing concern, spinning lies about my mental health to manipulate the people around me. It wasn't just cruel, it was dangerous. I thanked Claire, told her I appreciated her honesty, and then I saved the message. More documentation, more pieces for the puzzle I was building. I spent the next month gathering. I started with old emails, messages from Lauren, my parents, even a few from Eric over the years. Passive-aggressive jabs about how you've always been too sensitive, or you never really pitched in like the rest of us. I organized them into folders, screenshotted threads, labeled voice messages. Then I went deeper. Pete introduced me to a lawyer friend, Maggie, who specialized in financial disputes and family estate matters. I met with her one Saturday afternoon at a quiet little office downtown, handed her a flash drive, and walked her through everything. She listened, asked questions, took notes. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "They might not have committed fraud in the criminal sense, but this is a pattern of financial exploitation, especially if we can prove coercion or misrepresentation. If nothing else, it's civil. And frankly, it's morally bankrupt." That word, coercion, rattled in my chest like a key in a lock, because that's what they'd done for years. With guilt, with silence, with control disguised as care. And now, they were trying to do it again. Only this time, it was me who held the door. Maggie told me we had options. "Whether you want to sue or not," she said, "you have a case. You could go public. You could file a claim. You could even approach the bank about identity misuse, depending on what we find. But first, I suggest you sit on this a bit. Let them keep talking. Let them show you who they are when they think you're still quiet." And so I did. I waited. And as if on cue, they started to panic louder. Lauren called again. I let it go to voicemail. This time her voice was trembling. "Blake, I'm sorry." "Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't know about the account. I didn't know about the sign. I've had so much on my plate. The kids, work, everything. Mom and Dad they're falling apart. They're fighting all the time. Eric's threatening to move out. They might lose the house. Please, just talk to them. Please." Then, after a pause, she added, "You're not this cold. This isn't you." But it was me. Not cold. Just awake. No longer the one holding the rope while they played tug-of-war with my dignity. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered this time, out of curiosity. "Is this Blake Sanders?" "Yes. This is Officer Rutledge with the County Police Department. We received a report from a Mr. Eric Sanders that you've been threatening the family. He listed your number and email and said you've been sending harassing messages. Do you have a moment to speak with me?" My stomach dropped. For a brief second, the old fear came flooding back, the instinct to shrink, to apologize, to smooth things over. But I caught myself. "No, officer. I haven't contacted my brother in over a year. I have documentation of all communication. I'd be happy to share that with you." The officer paused. "Well, that's helpful." Honestly, his statement was thin, but we had to follow up. "Mind sending over whatever you have?" I did. Every email, every voicemail, every unreturned message, every screenshot showing that they had been the ones hounding me, not the other way around. I never heard back from Officer Rutledge, but the message was clear. Eric had tried to escalate things, maybe out of spite, maybe out of desperation, maybe because someone, likely my father, had told him to do it. And now, they'd played their hand. They weren't just desperate. They were dangerous, which meant it was time for me to stop playing defense. I called Maggie. "I want to move forward," I told her. "Not just legally. I want to make sure they can't do this again. To me, or anyone else." She helped me draft a cease and desist letter. We addressed it to each of them individually, my parents, Lauren, and Eric. It spelled out the harassment, the lies, the slander, and it warned that any further attempts to contact me, smear me, or involve law enforcement under false pretenses would result in immediate legal action. I sent it certified mail. Signature required. The silence that followed was deafening. No calls, no emails, no more voicemails at 2 a.m. Just nothing. For the first time in over a year, I breathed easy. But I wasn't done yet, because they had spent decades telling everyone I was unstable, ungrateful, unloving. They'd rewritten our story and handed it out like a script. And now, they were about to face the full consequences, not in anger, not in chaos, but in clarity. I started working on something else, something bigger. It began as a document, then a draft, then a story, not for the public, not yet, but a record of who I was, what they did, and what happens when the quiet one finally speaks. Because they'd called it one mistake. But soon, the world would know just how many there really were. I didn't get satisfaction from watching them suffer. That's the part people get wrong about revenge. It's not about watching someone burn while you sip coffee with a smile. It's not about rage or retaliation or even gloating. Not when you've been gaslit and discarded for most of your life. It's about clarity. About making sure the truth doesn't rot in your chest like a splintered rib. About finally reclaiming a story that was twisted from the moment you learned to speak. And for the first time, they would have to listen. I spent 2 months finalizing everything. Quietly. Precisely. It started with what I called the archive. A simple cloud folder organized into categories: financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, exclusion, smear campaign, legal threats, police involvement. Every voicemail, every email, every message they sent, every lie they told, cataloged, time-stamped, and paired with commentary. I included my own reflections, my therapist's notes, with her consent, and a timeline of every major incident from childhood through that birthday night with the sign on the door. It wasn't just for documentation. It was a mirror, one they couldn't shatter or look away from. Then I compiled a letter. Not an attack. A report. A full breakdown of what they did to me and why it mattered. I titled it, "The Son You Never Saw." And I sent it. Not to them. To the people they cared about. Their church leadership. Their neighborhood association board. My cousin's family. A few of their closest friends. The very same people they'd told for years that I was distant, unstable, selfish, and cold. Each recipient got a link to the archive. A personal note. Not accusatory. Not cruel. Just honest. I'm sharing this not to shame anyone, but to tell the story they've never allowed to be heard. I've remained silent out of fear and respect. That silence nearly broke me. I'm not asking you to take sides. I'm just asking you to read. The impact was immediate. I didn't hear from my parents directly, of course. That was expected. But Pete texted me the next morning. "Pete, Blake, what you sent out, people are talking. The church board is furious. A few of Mom's friends are distancing themselves. Some had no idea about the inheritance or the birthday thing. One lady said she's known them for 20 years and never once heard them mention you had a job." I almost laughed. 20 years. And somehow I was still invisible even when I wasn't in the room. But now, they couldn't pretend I didn't exist. My story was out. Unfiltered. Uncontrollable. And it spread. 2 weeks after the archive went out, I received a letter from their church. It was formal, but I could feel the emotion behind it. They thanked me for my vulnerability, expressed concern, said they'd reached out to my parents privately to offer counseling. One board member even emailed me personally and said, "I had no idea. I'm sorry for the role silence may have played in this." The fallout snowballed. Eric's old friends, some of whom were mutual connections from college, started commenting on Facebook. Subtle things, vague quotes, nothing direct. But I knew. And more importantly, they knew. Their social network was fraying. People were watching now, whispering. They were no longer the beloved family with the troubled middle child who never visits. They were the parents who locked their son out on his birthday, drained his inheritance, and then spread rumors about his mental health when he refused to save them. Lauren was the first to crack. She showed up at my new apartment. I'd moved a month prior and hadn't told anyone where. I still don't know how she found the address. But there she was, eyeliner smudged, cardigan clinging to her like armor, her voice tight and trembling. "You've destroyed everything," she hissed before I even opened the door all the way. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She pushed forward. "Do you know what you've done? Mom can't even go to the grocery store without someone asking about that damn letter. Dad's being pushed out of the HOA board. And Eric? He's talking about suing you for defamation." I gave her a long, steady look, then calmly said, "Good luck with that." I kept records. Her jaw clenched. "I didn't deserve this," she said. "None of us did." That was the last straw. I stepped out, closed the door behind me, and stood in front of her, not with anger, not with smugness, but with something colder, cleaner. "I begged for years," I said quietly. "For recognition. For space. For a sliver of decency. I gave you all chance after chance. I never lashed out. Never retaliated. I even kept showing up, hoping maybe one day someone would see me. I took a step closer. You made this. All of you. With every lie. Every silence. Every time you rolled your eyes and said I was being dramatic. You didn't care about me, Lauren. You cared about the version of me you could control. The one who stayed quiet and picked up the pieces." Her eyes glossed over. "We were trying to protect the family." "No," I said, voice hardening. You were trying to protect the image of the family." She didn't respond. She couldn't. And before she could launch into another tirade, I handed her an envelope. Inside was a formal letter from Maggie, the lawyer. It detailed my intention to seek legal repayment for the drained inheritance. It cited account numbers, transaction records, and legal statutes outlining exploitation of financial assets without consent. The letter ended with an option: settle privately, or we go to court. Lauren didn't say another word. She just left. 3 months later, I received a payment. $14,000. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a check in the mail from a joint account under my parents' names with the memo: settlement. It wasn't about the money. It never was. But it was the first time they were forced to give something back. And with that, the rope I'd carried around my neck for 30 years finally snapped. I took the check, deposited it, and transferred half of it to a local scholarship fund I'd been working with, the same one that helped kids who, like me, had been told they weren't enough by the people who should have lifted them up. The other half? I used to take a trip. Not a vacation. A reset. I went to a quiet cabin in the mountains. No signal. No noise. Just trees, silence, and peace. The kind I never knew existed. And on the final night there, I opened that same wine bottle I'd brought to my parents' house for my 30th birthday. The one that had sat unopened for a year and a half. I poured a glass, took a long sip, and wrote the final entry in my archive. They said I was being dramatic over one mistake. But it was never just one. And now, they finally understand. The son they discarded is the man who learned to stand. Not in spite of them, but without them. I closed the file, uploaded it to a secure drive, and walked away from it all. Not bitter, not broken, just free.